Shahnameh stories, the story of Siyamak and the Div Khasravān. The Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings, is the national epic of Iran and the supreme expression of the cultural identity of Iranians. It was written between 977 and 1010 AD by the poet Hakim Abul Qasim Ferdowsi, one of the greatest and most influential figures of Persian and indeed world literature. He was born in the city of Tus in the region of Khurasan in Iran in 940 AD, and after a prolific but difficult life, died there in 1025. His masterpiece, the Shahnameh, tells the mythical, legendary, and historical story of the Persian Empire from the creation of the world until the Arab conquest of Iran in the 7th century. It ends with the reign of the last Sasanian king, Yazdegerd III. It is a literary masterpiece and has been translated into more than 30 languages, with several different versions in English. The over 50,000 verses make it one of the world's longest epic poems. Its fantastic narrative cycle is one of the most illustrated, and there are hundreds of paintings involving Divs. The Divs inhabit the mythical and heroic age in a demon land called Mazandaran, not to be confused with the real province in Iran. They are named by attributes. Several have proper names, and others, including the White Div, who is one of the 3 Divs in the champion Rostam story, are known by color. The Shahnameh opens with the idyllic reign of Kewmars, the benevolent and just king who lived on a mountaintop and ruled the world for 30 years before the advent of evil. It was a time of prosperity and harmony, and all of God's creatures, from angels, or pari as they are called in Persian, animals, both wild and tame, and humans, gathered peacefully around Kewmars' throne and basked in the glory of his far, the divine right of kingship. The people dressed in animal and often leopard skins, and the world was filled with peace, joy, and oneness with nature. The king had a son called Siyamak, whom he lived for and loved to distraction, and even the thought of being separated from him made him weep. Loved by all, the handsome prince was a brave and dutiful son, anxious to serve his father. But the devil grew jealous of the king's good fortune and plotted to destroy him and all the goodness in the world. This enraged the young prince, who mobilized his soldiers and rushed out to meet the devil's army that was led by none other than Ahriman's own son, the Black Demon. A savage, wolf-like creature with a heart as dark as his hide, Khasravān is the first Div to enter the Shahnameh. The 2 armies faced each other and stood ready to charge, but the courageous and naive Siyamak chose to ride out and battle Div Khasravān in single combat. Alas, he didn't stand a chance. As there was no armor, he was dressed in the customary leopard skin, and the Black Div sunk his claws into Siyamak's unprotected body and threw him to the ground. Now in the dirt, he laid the king's son low, clawed at his gut, and struck the fatal blow. So perished Siyamak, a demon's hand left leaderless his people and his land. There are not many known illustrations of this incident, and usually show the single combat in the middle of a landscape being watched by the armies and an array of colorful spectator divs. In his Shahnameh, Ferdowsi doesn't give much physical detail about the divs, and most illustrations are at the imaginative discretion of the artists. However, over the centuries, the often crude and monstrous depictions of evil change to reveal character and personality. The divs begin to communicate a deeper level of individuality, emotion, and humanity. This transformation reaches its height in color and liveliness in the 16th century. The early Safavid divs are immediately recognizable by their pastel colors and their enhanced coordination and relationship with humans, the surrounding rock outcrops, and vegetation. Both the text on the folios and the action tend to highlight the moment that the Black Div sinks his claws into Siyamak, lifts him up, and throws his lifeless body to the ground. The few illustrations of this scene show Khasravān as particularly beast-like and ferocious, and despite his name, there are examples of the Black Div being other colors. Here, for example, he is painted pale blue to accord with the rest of the pastel-colored divs and landscape. The artist has also gone beyond Ferdowsi's text and exaggerated the combat. The text describes the div digging his claws into Siyamak and throwing him to the ground, not pulling him off his horse and biting his head off. In this painting, Siyamak's delicate body, characteristically clad in leopard, and as the text specifies, tiger skin, is pathetically weak and frail. Its slightness accentuates the div's mammoth mouth as he devours his victim's tiny head. The horse's futile bite into his back contrasts the hearty chomp of the thick, crude lips as they close in with barbarity around the frightened, youthful face. But the standard serenity and seeming inexpressiveness of Persian miniature painting belie the intense drama that pulses within. Here, the despair and horror in the furrowed brows and the arm gestures of Siyamak soldiers are indicated by the humans, but we feel them in the vegetation. As we shall see throughout these videos, passion and emotion run deep in Persian miniatures, but it is nature that communicates them, not human expression. Meticulously planned, there is a rhyme and reason to the gestures and the lines that lead the eye in several circular motions around the main action. Starting from the top right, the raised arms and V-shaped hands of the red soldier are echoed by the V-shaped sprigs of the double-headed bush at the top left. Alerted to the commotion by the central trees that lunge towards it excitedly, it pokes out from behind the rocks at the scene. Its graceful twist slopes the eye down the hill to step over the two stone scepters of the divs directly to the entangled trio, where yet another, tighter, circular cluster is formed by the action of the bites. However, the brutality of this scene is wholly encapsulated in the electrified screech of the frantic tree root under the horse. Mirroring the top left tree's jazz hands, it has not only grown in size, horror, and alarm, but is rushing to the prince's aid, its arms and legs spread out in a virtual effort to separate them. Similarly, in this painting, the savagery of the killing as the Black Div sinks in his sharp claws is belied by the seemingly unmoved and expressionless Siyamak. Here, the excruciating pain inflicted is conveyed by the tortured and unnatural bend of the small bushes angled above the central action. At the top right, 3 of the 4 colorful divs stare, transfixed by their writhing, and by extension, Siyamak's agony. This painting, also entitled The Div Khasravān Kills Siyamak, comes from an extraordinary manuscript dated 1605 that has a particularly large number of div and dragon scenes, 2 of which we will come to later on in this series. The main action takes place on a gold-green landscape, at the center of which is Siyamak's single combat with the Black Div. At the top left, orange, brown, pale blue, and purple divs, the latter bird-like with an orange beak, look on. The grotesque and ogre-like divs have somewhat human features and blend into the rock landscape. The undulating pastel rock formations are a particular feature of Persian miniatures, and we will find and discuss them in many paintings. In this depiction of the demon, we see the complete representation of a monster, all in stark and raw contrast to a refined prince. The multi-layered sharp horns that look like antlers contrast the soft velvet at the center of the crown with its wispy feather. The large black-clawed feet with the foot spur ground the div firmly into the landscape, while Siyamak's delicate indoor red slippers underscore his weakness, frailty, and pathetic unpreparedness. The scene is frozen at the very moment that the div digs his claws into Siyamak's neck and chest. His mouth opens in evil triumph and salivates at the pale, smooth, and rosy-cheeked face. Although Siyamak seems unmoved and non-expressive, true to Persian miniature painting, the violence and horror are conveyed by nature. As his lifted right arm, having failed to thwart the attack, flops feebly over the div's grip, it does, nevertheless, give an inclination of a last-ditch effort to fight back. The power of the div's forward thrust, propelled by his muscular calves and thighs, is indicated by his tunic that swings open to give a peek into his private parts, while its speed is reflected in the sweep of Siyamak's silk sash as he falls backwards. This painting is masterful in its symmetry and balance of shapes and hues. The colorful rocks of the divs at the top are mirrored in those at the bottom right, on which a variety of animals look on, bewildered. The peaceful presence of the white cheetah next to the black horse not only echoes the Black Div and Siyamak in color and pattern, but is reminiscent of the harmony of the world before the advent of evil. On the purple edge, a stretched-out fox blends seamlessly into the rock strata. A feature of Persian miniature painting that we will see a lot of and is on ample view here is the creation of mood through nature. While the Black Div is horrific looking, notice that none of the spectators are frightened. At best, they look on in mild consternation and curiosity. But now look at the landscape. It is terrified. The stillness of the spectators serves to amplify the cries of the flowers and shrubs as they lunge forward, draw back in twisted terror, flap about in frenzy, or scamper away to avoid being trampled on. In the next video, we will meet the Black Demon again as Kewmar Shah and his grandson Hushang raise a formidable army of all of God's creatures, including the supernatural, and set off to avenge the slain Siyamak.